Bit shift left, BSL, working with bit shift left instruction. Bit shift instructions, beginning with the bit shift left. You can see that I have the logic in that I had you enter in the lab manual and open up these two files. When I'm working with bit shift instructions, I tend to open up more than one word. You can see that in the binary file B3, I have it opened a little deeper to show 13, 14, 15. That's really not necessary. If you just had 15 shown, you would be fine. One of the challenges of using these instructions is being able to follow what's going on. I mean, you look at the logic, you've got an input 0, which would say shift left. If that goes on, and notice my bit address and the instruction is input 5. So if you look at your input file there, 0 through 15, none of those bits are on. So if I toggle input 0, it shows enable and done. So it is shifting. The problem is you're shifting zeros. So right now the state of the bit address I:0.0/5 is 0. When I go from false to true on the BSL, it shifts a length of 10 bits. It's actually going to shift all 16, but we're only concerned about the 10 because right now 0 through 9 got shifted to 1 through 10. Well, 10 is just past the boundary of the group that we shift. So if I hit it again, of course it's all zeros, so you can't see anything shifting. It's going to shift until it gets to the end of the word. So when you're shifting to the left, it doesn't just get to the 11th location and then drop out of sight. It will get shifted all the way to the end. So I'm going to turn on input 5, and you can see input 5 right here is on. And now I'm going to push input 0 once. Okay, now you see what it did. It loaded it on the first shift. It loaded it into bit 0. It didn't move it from 0 to 1. So when I do the shift, it loads 1. If I do the shift again, I'm going to turn input 5 off. So you notice over here I've got a 0. And I toggle that again. See, it moved it from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so forth. When I get to the end, that's the 10th bit, and shift it again. Now the unload bit is on. That says that that bit just reached the unload position. So we have a length of 10, which is 0 through 9. The very next bit is going to be the unload position. So if you're looking for the bits that are shifting out of the length, you're going to look at the next highest bit, the next most significant bit. In this case is 10. Watch what happens when I toggle it again, and notice that my input is off. So I'm not putting in a 1 at bit 0 of B315. I shift it one more time. The unload bit went off, and look where our bit is at. It's at 11. Okay, 10 was the 11th bit. Always keep in mind that 0 is first and 10 is 11th. Bit 10 is the 11th bit. This is actually the 11th bit right here. I'm sorry. This is the 11th bit. This is the 12th bit. So it shifted to the 12th position. If I keep shifting, see, it goes right on out. But it's going to shift to the end of the word. It doesn't just disappear into space after the unload position. And that's really all there is to the bit shift left instruction. You have to know where the unload position is, and you determine that for a bit shift left. The bit shift left instruction always loads at bit 0. It doesn't load in the middle of the word. You can't, the bit address, that won't load into some other bit position that you designate. For a bit shift left, the bit address that you're monitoring. We're monitoring input 5. I'm going to turn on input 5 again. And if you look over here, you see 5 is on. You look over here, you see 0. So the first execution is going to move this 0. Think about this closely. It's going to move this 0 to this position. Well, you can't see it move. You just have to know that it's moving. So if it moves this 0 into this 0, before it did that, it had to move this 0 to this 0, this one to this one, and so forth. So it's going to shift all 16 bits to the left on the very first execution here. So I've got a 1 for my bit address. When I push the button and release, it shifted all 16 bits to the left, and it replaced bit 0 with whatever value was at bit address input 5. If I leave input 5 on and toggle it again, now you see there are 2 1s in there because it shifted 0 through 15 to the left and replaced bit 0 with the 1. So think of it as, if you like, these zeros as white ping pong balls in a horizontal tube. And at the left end, and this tube is long enough to hold 16 ping pong balls and no more. Picture at the left of the tube, there's a little flap on the end that provides just enough resistance to keep the ping pong balls from falling out. But if you shove them over to the left, one of them is going to pop out and drop into an endless bit bucket somewhere, off into the ozone. That opens up a space at bit 0 for whatever color ping pong ball is next up. If it's a 0, well, then it just replaces it with a 0. If it's a white ping pong ball, if it's a 1 or a black ping pong ball, then it drops in a black one. If you shift it again and you've still got black ping pong ball selected, then it just keeps filling it up. And every time you toggle this, look, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 black ping pong balls in there, and then all the rest of them to the left are white. If I flip input 5 off now, nothing happens to B315. The only time B315 is affected is when you hit the shift left button up there. In other words, you go from false to true on the BSL. See, it shifted all 6 of those 1s to the left, put in a 0 behind it. To the left, put in a 0 behind it. And when it gets to the end, one more white ping pong ball, that popped out. Now we're popping out black ping pong balls every time we shift. Now we're full of white ping pong balls. You can't see anything happening other than the enable and the done bit, right? That's why these instructions are troublesome for troubleshooting. If you wrote the code yourself and you remember what you were doing, then you can look at these and say, okay, I remember now. And go look at the unload bit. And matter of fact, that's why I put the unload bit up there. One thing I didn't point out, let's do that again. I just toggled 6 in there. And I'm going to turn the input 5 back off, and I'll go down until I hit 8. At 9, you see I have, if I consider the length designated in the instruction, that is 0 through 9. If I shift one more time, and by the way, the unload bit, R6:10/unload, there's no address on it. It's just a bit. You can't see that it happens to be bit 10 or the 11th bit. If I shift it one more time, because right now it's saying you unloaded a 0. That's the problem, is there is a difference between nothing and 0. In this case, we're talking about 0 or off, not nothing. So typically you look at zeros and you think there's nothing there. Well, that 0 right now at bit 10 of B315 is significant. It is the state that was shifted from bit 9 to bit 10. If I shift one more time, now you see I shifted a 1 into the unload position, but notice R610UL, you can't look at that and know it's bit 10. You have to look at the length. Now, coincidentally, I guess I can't say they planned on it because the length is 10, 0 through 9 is what you're shifting. But the length 10, which does not imply bit 10, but coincidentally, it is bit 10 that is the unload position. So I'm going to toggle one more time, and you're going to see all of the bits shift. Now, the bit that was just at 10 is now at 11. If I keep shifting, and every time I shift, I've got one more bit to shift to bit 10 that's a 1. Okay, and you see the unload bit's still on. If I go one more time, I'm shifting a 0 out of my length of 10 and into bit 10, the unload position. That's it for bit shift left instruction. Now, in the manual, I had you do a bunch of things to emphasize what I just explained. Okay, to answer some of the questions that were in the book, we did really cover those in what I just went through, but I'll go back to the beginning, and in a step it said, while observing bit 0, a B315 switch input on. Did the bit 0, a B315 change? No. What is the address and present value of the bit address that the BSL, bit shift left instruction, is reading? The address is input 5 and the value is 0 because the switch is off. Did any bits in either file, well, I had you with input 0 off, I had you switch on input 5, and that in itself didn't change anything. Did any bits in either file change state? Well, yes, they did in input 5, but not in B315. And I did point that out already. Leaving input 5 on, because it has to be on when you execute the bit shift left. Switch input 0 on. Did any of the bits in B315 change state? Yes, they did. Which bits? Bit 0. Switch input 0 off. That's the bit address that triggered the false to true transition for the BSL. Did the bit in B315 change state when you toggled input 0 on or off? It changed state when you toggled it on, so it's the false to true transition. Then I had you shift the bit all the way through, and how many false to true transitions to get it to bit 9. That's the 10th position. That's the length 10, bit 9. It took 9 transitions. Toggle input 0 once more. What memory location did the bit shift to? Bit 10, which is the 11th bit. What else happened? The unload bit came on and consequently the output. Toggle input 0 one more. Where did the bit shift to? It shifted to the next most significant bit, from bit 10 to bit 11, which is the 12th bit. Did the unload bit stay on? No, because you unloaded a 0 from the length. Toggle input 0 until it reaches bit 15. While watching the bit, toggle input 0 on off once. Where did the bit shift to? Well, you might come up with a variety of answers, but basically it went out into bit space. It just evaporated. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just gone. Okay, toggle input 0 10 times, each time with input 5 in an alternate state. This is just to give you a pattern of every other bit being a 1, 0. This should give you an alternating bit pattern. Okay, switch input 5 off, toggle the trigger if you like, or the shift instruction, while watching the indicator output 3 as each one shifts left through the word. Shift the bits until all of the 1 bits are past the number 10 bit, which is the 11th bit. When does the unload bit change to the on state? After a shift of a 1 in bit 9 to bit 10. When does the unload bit change to an off state? After a shift of a 0 in bit 9 to bit 10. From your keyboard, change the state of bit 7 to a 1. Then I had you shift it. The question was, does the unload bit behave the same regardless of how the 1 got into the memory word between the length 0 and 9, 0 to 9? From your keyboard, change bit 13 to a 1 and shift it out of the word. Set bit 10 to 1. Shifting 13 out was just to show you that you can throw in a bit outside of the length and it's irrelevant. Shift it out and then set bit 10 to 1. This is a real important point. Did the unload bit come on? No. Now it was on before when bit 10 was on, right? Why it didn't come on this time is no execution of the bit shift left instruction from the end of the length to the unload. In other words, the instruction or the data type using the control word R60 has to see a 1 leave the end of the length before it's going to turn on the unload bit or before it turns it off. If you had all 1s in there and you were looking for a 0, you're looking for the unload bit to go off when the 0 shifts from 9 to 10. What can you say about all the positions above the bit that represents the last position of the length? With the length less than 16, that is. It's irrelevant. Those bits are irrelevant. They're there, values are shifting, but they are not within the length. Change the length to 16, shift a 1 through the word while watching bit 0 of the next word. So I have a 1 here at 8, so I'm just going to toggle it on. Whoops, that's in bit 16. I'm going to toggle 1 into 15 here in that position. I'm shifting the 1 through. 14, 15. Watch closely. The length is 16. If this holds true to form, if I toggle it one more time, also watch bit 0 of 16. That would be the next memory bit. The unload comes on, but B316 does not. You don't see bit 0 of B316 going on. It didn't shift it into the next word because the next word is not within the length specified in the instruction. But the unload bit did turn on. So that proves to you that this unload bit is not one of these bits. It's actually part of the control word right here, R1610. There's the unload bit, length 16, and position. We haven't touched the position yet. What happened when the 1 shifted left from bit 15 to B315? It just evaporated. It went into bit space because the next bit in memory, 16.0, is not part of the length. Now I had you change the length to 17, and that will include bit 0 of B316 right here. And I had you shift a 1 through it. I'll just save some time. Use the keyboard, put a 1 in there, and shift it to 14. Whoops, I put it in the wrong one. Should have been in B315. Okay, I have a 1 in bit 14. Now it's in 15. Now, see, it went to bit 0 of 16. But the unload bit didn't come on because this is bit the 17th bit. So 0 through 15 is 16, and 1 more is 16. So let's go 1 more. Now the unload bit comes on because it's shifted from bit 0 right here of word 15. It shifted all the way through these 16. It got to the 17th bit, which is the first bit of the next word, and then when it left there, it turned on the unload bit. So this bit is on, not because that's 1, but because this bit was 1 when you executed the bit shift left instruction. What happened when 1 shifted left from bit 15 of B315? Well, it turned on bit 0 of word 16. It shifted to the next word. What happens when you increase the length beyond 16 bits? It's going to shift the bit pattern into the next highest word in memory. I'm going to clear these all out here And I'm going to shift a bit. I just put a bit into bit 15. I'm shifting through now, and I have I'm in the 17th bit position now, right? In other words, you got 16 bits here, 0 through 15, that's 16 bits. That's the 17th bit. That's the end of the length. If I toggle it one more time, the unload bit would come on. However, I'm going to change it to 33. Now I'm going to toggle the shift. The previous shift, the length was 17. Now it's 33. This is to point out to you that the bit shift left instruction, when it sees a false or true transition and executes, it executes based on what you put in that instruction, which was take the value of input 5, put it in bit 0 of B315, and shift 33 bits, starting with bit 0 of B315. And after you shift it, replace bit 0 of word 15 with the state of the bit address input 5. And when you shift a 1 out of the end of the length, turn on the unload bit. Well, in this next shift, I shifted it, and if the previous length was still relevant, it would have turned on the unload bit right now, but it didn't. So now I'm going to shift it. That 1 is in 16. So I'm going to take it all the way to the end of B316. So now it's shifted over 30 positions. If I go one more, now it's in bit 1 of B317 down here. If I go one more, it shifts it to bit 1 of 17 and turns on the unload bit. Further on down, I had you change the length to 2048 and press and release input 0. Well, what happens depends upon whether you've expanded your B3 file all the way out to the maximum. If you didn't, then it bumped it up to 4096. So this is unexpected behavior. I did not have you increase the length or the size of the array B3. So I'm going to pause, go offline and do that. This lab was originally written for a different micrologics, and there are very slight, almost imperceptible differences. We're doing this with micrologics 1400, which is a different controller than a 1000. 1400 is much more powerful, has a lot more latitude. So the behavior we saw of entering 2048 and it changing to 4096, that was a behavior I did not expect. So now I'm going to change this. I went offline and I changed this to 256 elements. Okay, that's maxed out. Now I'm going to go in here and type in 2048, toggle it, and it remains 2048. And you see the 1 dancing across the screen through B317. It's in bit 9 right now. Put your focus there, bit 10, bit 11, so forth. Then I had to change it to 2049. And it would not let you. That's because the maximum distance, the maximum number of words that you can shift through is 128. You can't use the entire B3 array with a bit shift left. Only 128 words, which would be 0 through 127. Remember, 0 is the first word, 127th is the 128th word. I had you put in a length of 0 and execute the logic, which you see here. And of course, when you're shifting zeros, you don't see anything, right? But I have ones. So let's turn off input 5. Let's turn input 5 back on. On the very first shift, it turns on the unload bit. What's interesting is, if you look at B315, you don't see any bits shifting across to B315. So a length of 0 is really not within the function of the bit shift instruction. Okay, we went back to a length of 10. I added this rung, that when this rung is true, it will move whatever's in the register N70, the word, integer word N70, whatever's in there, which happens to be 12 right now, it'll move it into the length word of the control element R610. So if we were to toggle one more time, we're in bit 9 now, we have a 1 in bit 9. If I were to toggle shift left one time, it would go from the 10th bit to the 11th bit, bit 9 to 10, and the unload bit would turn on. But if I press input 1, let's try input 1. So we're at bit 9, we got a 1 right here, poised to unload to bit 10, which if we did this right now, the unload bit would come on. But instead, I'm going to push input 1. That moves the 12 into the length. And when I toggle one more time, it does not come on. Now, it's in the 12th bit right now. Bit 11 is the 12th bit. If I go one more time, then the unload turns on. So further emphasizing that every execution of the bit shift left, the result depends on what you have in that instruction at the time it's executed. At the time the run goes from false to true, the length was 12. It was 10 on the last scan. And then somebody pushed the button and it moved to 12 in there. Now the unload bit's not going to come on when it goes from the 10th bit to the 11th bit. Then the answer's in the book. You turned on input 1, toggled it. Did the length change? Yes. Toggle input 0 on then off. You would have expected the unload bit to be on if you had not changed the length. That is true. Shift the bit through 11 to energize output 3. Shift another one into bit 9 and stop. So I'm going to shift that one all the way out and then put another one in to 9. Change N70 to 8. Okay, so we're going to go up here. I could do it here. I'll just do it here. That's what I told you to do. Change it to 8. Push the button. Now the length is 8. Okay, the bit was poised on the next shift to go to the 11th bit, bit 10, and turn on the unload bit. But in between this being shifted the last time and what we're going to do next, we changed the length to 8. So when we shift now, the unload bit's never going to come on for that one because we changed the length of the length word in the control element R6:10. So did the unload bit energize? No. Why? No transition from the last bit of the length, which would be bit 7 or the 8th bit, because remember we changed the length to 8. It did not see a 1 going from the 8th bit to the 9th bit when we executed the shift. Okay, the summary, the boundary of bits shifted includes the adjacent word if in your memory if your length exceeds the number of bits in the base word, starting at bit 0 of the base word. So it's all going to stay within that base word if you have 16 or less for length. If you've got 17 or more, it's going to bump into the next word. If you have 33, then it's going to bump into the next word, and so forth. The unload bit state represents the state of the bit shifted out of the last position of the length, not the state of the last bit in the length. The unload bit is an actual memory location. It is a bit in the control word of the instance of a controlled data type that you assigned to your bit shift left instruction. Bit values continue to shift to the next word boundary past the last bit in the length. So if it makes it into the next word, it will continue to shift to the end of that word. Now the bit shift right behaves very similar with just a couple of differences.